Welcome back to our Land Bulletin series. I'm Haley Mirr, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Development here at Mirr Ranch Group. This is the Land Bulletin series where every other week we discuss the ranch and sporting property market, buying and selling advice, the latest best stewardship practices, as well as topics currently impacting landowners. Mirr Ranch Group is a full-service ranch real estate brokerage and consulting company focusing on legacy ranches and sporting and conservation properties around the West. Today, we're here to talk about the current ranch real estate market, exploring its current landscapes, trends, and perspectives of both buyers and sellers. Helping me out today is Tom Alexander. Tom has been the rural real estate industry since 1982, first as a Texas real estate broker and later as a pioneer in ranch real estate publishing. He founded Farm and Ranch Publishing in 1991, which was home to the first full-color real estate magazine in the marketplace, and farmandranch.com, one of the earliest rural ranch real estate websites. Today, he serves as the publisher of Texas Land and Land magazines, which are a part of Land.com network and something that Mirr Ranch Group publishes their ads in every time. We love what they do. So without further ado, here's Tom.
Hi, Haley. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. I love your magazines. I love what you guys do. So I'm grateful that you took time out of your day to discuss the ranch real estate market with us today.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So I guess, before we get into the current ranch real estate market, I know you've been doing this for a while now, especially down in Texas. So I guess we'll look first at the historic market trends. What did this market look like back in 1982? Because I know things have changed dramatically since then.
They have changed. In 1982, actually, let's go back to 1980. Grew up in Houston. It was an oil town. It was actually, if you were watching the news, it always referred to it as Boom Town because it was crazy. Oil was going up. I think it was close to hitting $150 a barrel. I think land at the time was running up to around $700, the average cost or price per acre. And then going into, 80, 81, 82, things started to change a little bit. We were getting into the interest rates were getting real high. You had a little bit of stagflation, but we had this period where there was a little bit of a runoff, and then it started to fall off basically because oil was dropping. It was going from 150 down to $29 a barrel. And you would say land really kind of followed that. And it took a pretty big dip. This is back in a time when there weren't many regulations on the banks. And you had the savings and loan, and they were getting into trouble, and it just got real messy for a couple of years. Actually, a pretty long time. From the time that the market peaked, that I was going to say around, the early 80s, till the time it came back, it was like 17 years of this trough. So you had a period where some people were letting go of properties and then literally buying them back 2 or 3 years later.
Wow.
But if you let that market do what it's going to do, you bought at a good price and then rode that back up, and people were making really good money. But it wasn't until 1992 that everything really turned around. And I got lucky. That's when I started the first Farm and Ranch magazine.
Okay. And have you primarily just been in Texas since your career started back in the 80s?
Yeah, pretty much. That's the land that I dealt with. That's where my family was from. After we started the first, it was actually Texas Farm and Ranch magazine. Then I guess 5 years later, we started the Rocky Mountain version. So that's when we traveled up to Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, and all that area, and got to meet the brokers there. It was a new concept at the time when I started the Texas Farm and Ranch magazine in 91. I remember sitting down with a broker, Frank Childress, who at that time, there just weren't that many brokers that were really prominent in Texas. I would say there may have been really 20 that were doing the majority of the business. And there was no internet. And when I sat down with Frank, he had a spiral notebook and it had hundreds of listings in there that he was just flipping through, and there weren't that many buyers. And he was spending, I think, $250 per weekend on black and white classified ads that ran Houston, Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio.
Wow.
So $1,000 a month to be in those 4 markets with a classified ad, and it would come out on Friday and gotta be in the trash by Monday or Tuesday. So this idea for a color magazine that would really have a length of time of being out there was a new concept.
Mhm.
And fortunately, we put it out, we mailed it to the wealthy people around Texas, and it worked. So,
And it's
yeah.
so crucial. I mean, our photography, our videos, the visual component of what we do is so integral to what we do, and so crucial for people to really understand ranches. So it's crazy to me that that's how things used to be done, like the classifieds, black and white, because
I know. It's nuts, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
funny, we were just talking today, so when Ken started, he used to lay out these huge maps and he'd have to go to the assessor site to even figure out who landowners were. And now everything is so digital and I have it easy.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got land ID now, the map right. And there's amazing tools out there now, which is really what I see is, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but
You're good.
the sophistication of the market is
Mhm.
what we're really seeing. And I think that's just going to continue to expand. And what we're seeing in the land.com network, just of our numbers of the people that are coming in, looking at properties, it's amazing.
So I guess that's a great segue then about the current market. What is happening in the market right now? What shifts have you seen since being kind of here and since the pandemic? What are the changes that you're seeing over at Land?
Yeah. So what I was saying, going back to the 80s up until like 2019, what you had was this amazing run up in the values. And I want to say, I think by 1992, it was, I think we had gone back to about $900 per acre. And then watching the run up in the market from 2002, we had gotten back to this $800 per acre, which is where we were, but way back in the 80s. And then from 2002 to 2008, we went from about $800 an acre to an average of $1,900 per acre. And
Wow.
then we had the subprime mortgage crisis, and the prices didn't really dip, but the volume of sales is what we saw. That fell off about 75%. And it was kind of strange because you would have expected that values would have dipped, and they did a little bit, but it wasn't that significant. And I guess the Fed putting money back in the market and supporting the banks, nobody got in a lot of trouble at the time. So you didn't see foreclosures on properties. And then we're often running again. The market just runs up, and we get to 2019, and I think we're like at $2,900 per acre average cost across the state of Texas.
Wow.
So, and then 2019, and COVID hits, and everything just stops for a couple of months. I remember talking to brokers, and everybody was kind of thinking the same thing. Is the market going to turn? What's going to happen? Everybody starts getting sent home. And I think with the pandemic and the fear setting in and people being at their house and, again, working from home, they get on their computer, they're thinking, what's going to be safe for my family? What's safe for my money? And the first thing that comes to their mind is land, because they're thinking, where can I be right now? Where can I put my money that is stable? And then where can I go that is secure and safe for my family? So they start looking at land. And I think at that time, land.com, we had around 5 to 7 million unique visitors per month. Wow. And we saw literally in about a 6-month period, that ran up to 10 to 12 million. So that's just all. And then that translated over to the prices going up. So, people were moving, residential was doing well. The land market went crazy. It went, I think by late 2022, we were up at almost $4,900 per acre. So from 29 to 4,900. So just running up, you had to go out, and if you saw a property that you liked, you just immediately had to close on it and be ready to buy. And it just, it ran up. And actually, we're seeing now, I think prices for this year are already up 8%. The volume is down a little bit, but that's to be expected. How long can you run at Mach 4?
Right.
At some time, you just got to get down to your normal level. So I heard a broker say the other day, it's not like 2020, it's not like 2021 or 2022, but it's better than 2019. And 2019 was good.
Yeah. And we're seeing that here too. I mean, like you said, you can't run at Mach 4 for as long as we have been. And now it gives our buyers, our sellers, everyone a chance to breathe almost. And understand what their next step is going to be with this investment, because we really felt during that crazy time that our buyers, they were almost forcing themselves to buy things at certain prices because they were worried about the finite amount of or supply that was out there. So we're kind of excited as brokers for this. The prices are still there. The inventory has definitely increased, this summer, from the beginning of this summer to right now. But it's definitely given us a chance to breathe and be a little bit more conscientious about our decision making.
Yeah. And there's a lot of big properties that are hitting the market, and then you have some of the large sales like the Sixes Ranch and the phenomenon of Yellowstone and how that affects the market, just people wanting that lifestyle. And now, frankly, which is also what we learned at COVID with Starlink and with some of the renewable energy, if you can put solar panels on your property, I saw the other day, somebody was taking these containers and building them out of small houses. So you just go buy your 100 acres, plop it down, hook up your Starlink, put a solar in there, and you're off and running.
Oh yeah,
So
it's much more accessible.
Yeah, how great for new buyers in the market, which I actually have a passion for. I love the big deals, and the magazine is always tracking really large sales, and that's always, it's an amazing market and the properties that are out there. But when I see somebody step out and buy that first property for $250,000 and improve it, and they're getting into the market, it's like something they always wanted. They had this vision. What was their perfect property? And they finally go out and get it done.
Yeah. The accessibility is definitely there now. People who never imagined they could be stewards of the land and own landscapes can now have that opportunity. And, even the job market out there, the ability to work remotely and how that's changed the market space too. It's really interesting. And I know there's been some mandates to go back to the office, things like that, but I don't foresee that really deterring people from purchasing land and wanting to move into these rural areas.
Yeah, I agree. Even if you just want to set up a place that you go to for 1 week out of every month, you can just go there. Or if you want that place just in case, COVID hits again or something happens. Yeah, security.
And where
better than gold.
Yeah, there you go. And in your opinion, the future of the market, we've talked about the pandemic, we've talked about the 2000s. Where do you see the future of the market going from a perspective of a seller and for a buyer?
I think what we're seeing is going to continue on. Certainly we're not going to see, I don't believe, the doubling of prices like we had, but I think good land is so hard to come by that I think it's going to keep its value. And historically, that's what we see. We've seen that these values just long-term continue to go up. And even if there is a slight clawback at one time, it blows right past that once you get going. So, I've got a friend of mine that years ago, he bought a place that was, I think his father owned it and his father passed away. He had to buy it. And it was a small place, like 80 acres. And he bought it from his family. And everybody was giving him trouble. It's like, no, you should put that into the stock market. Well, he grew timber on it. It put his son through college. And now it's gone from what he paid, $500 per acre, up to, I think the value is $4,800 per acre now. And he hunts it. He's got timber back on it. He just built a cabin up there. He's like, I'm going to leave this to my son. It's the greatest thing I've ever done. That's not your $100 million buyer, but I think it's a good snapshot into the industry of, if you buy good quality property and you can afford it, don't overbuy. If it's not strictly an investment for you, you can improve that property and it will stay with you for life, or you can flip it in 1031 into larger and better properties.
No, that's great advice. And I think, to your point, I think that was another huge part of this shift of interest, the volatility of the market in other areas, with the stock market, things like that. I think that pushed even more people over. I even saw it with, the buyers, the kinds of buyers we were starting to see were people that would never have been in this type of market space, but realized, oh, this is something. And we talked about this a little bit before. I can actually enjoy my investment while I watch it grow. I can hunt some deer on my investment as I watch it grow. You can't do that with the stock. So
yeah, exactly. Some people argue and say, oh, it's not a liquid investment. And I'm like, yeah, well, that's a good thing when the stock market's going down, because that's what you're hearing is the circling of the drain as you just watch your money dwindle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do that with land. You may not be able to get out as quickly, but it's there. And if you don't sell it, it's going to retain that value, and then it's going to grow.
Yeah. And another, that kind of brings us into another kind of conversation I'd love to have. We just started a partnership with King Land and Water. They're down in Texas to understand the role that Texas plays in the overall ranch real estate landscape. And we're really good at the Rocky Mountain region, but I'd just love to know, in your opinion, after being in the Texas ranch real estate market, what is the role that Texas plays in the overall ranch real estate landscape? From buyers and sellers. Like, we have a ton of buyers that come from Texas, and I think they're creating a lot of their investment based on things that they're learning in the landscapes that they're coming from. So I'd just love to know your opinion.
Honestly, like y'all, King Land and Water is a fantastic company, and Tammy and James and Harrison, great people. I think they're so conservation minded and been tied into that community. And at one time, because of the property rights advocates and just our independent thinking here in Texas, conservation easements were not looked on favorably. So, but they were in Colorado, and y'all had more public land. But it just seemed like you were doing more of those up there than we were down here in Texas. But as time goes on, and you're finding that large places are hard to find, more and more properties are going under conservation easements. And then now with mitigation banking and carbon sequestration, it's opening up an entire new market. So I think what Texas does, back to that, the very terrain, you just have a microcosm. You've got the mountains of West Texas. You have the hill country property with the rivers and waters. You've got East Texas, that is going to be more of your timberland. And then you have far North Texas, which is like the Sixes stuff, the just hardcore ranch company or ranch land. So I think, Texas has just always been a good model to where our terrain is so varied, our economy is strong, our land market is so large that as that moves, the rest of the market, not that it's following it, but it just seems to kind of move in that direction with it.
And I think a lot of, like I was saying, a lot of the investors that are investing in land are coming from Texas. They understand the importance of, land ownership. There's giant swaths of land, way bigger than you'll see in the Rocky Mountain region. So they understand what it means to be a steward and how to take care of these landscapes. Whereas maybe some of the other kind of investors we have coming from New York or LA, things like that, they just don't quite get it as much as people from Texas.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, your area is very popular around this time, because when it's 103 degrees in Texas and it's about 74 degrees in your area.
Oh, I woke up, it was 50 degrees. My brother's down in Dallas. He's making the trip north. He's moving back. He can't do it anymore. But yeah, no, it's definitely interesting seeing the connection between the Rocky Mountain region and Texas. And you kind of alluded to it earlier. But the biggest difference that I see is the public land difference up in the Rocky Mountains, the kind of the resort town influence that we have in some of these mountain towns like Vail and Aspen, and what that does to market value. And I don't know, in Texas, do you see those kind of bigger towns in those different regions having an effect on market value like it does up in the Rockies?
You mean like a resort town?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you have areas like Fredericksburg, which, is just now kind of a little winery town. And it's beautiful. So the land values there have just absolutely gone insane. And it's not that far to get there from Austin or from San Antonio. Okay. So, the hill country has always been the most popular area, because I guess with it being just a couple of hours from San Antonio and from Austin and maybe 4 hours from Houston, the mornings there the climate was drier, and it might be 70 degrees when you get up in the morning, or 69, as opposed to 87 like it is in Houston. So that's always been kind of our the summer places for the people in the big cities. But yeah, for sure, these smaller towns, Bastrop, like I said, Fredericksburg, Blanco, they're all opening up really nice restaurants and wineries around them. And, whether it's people being able to live there and then maybe commute back into town when they need to work, they're popular.
Yeah. And it's like we were talking about earlier, with these people moving to these rural communities and wanting to buy these ranches, kind of the infrastructure and the businesses that exist in those places kind of have to meet the demand too. So it's been interesting. I don't know if you're seeing it in Texas too, but these growth of these towns that maybe didn't have the same amount of restaurants and activities to happen. They're blossoming.
They are. It's can be a hard adjustment for the locals.
Mm-hmm.
Like here in our little town of Bernie, we're about 30 miles west of San Antonio. And it's a wonderful little town, only about 14,000 people. But if you've lived here for a long time, there's a lot of change that's happening. And change is inevitable. It's going to happen. But, these small towns, their personality does seem to change. But usually, long term, it's for the better restaurants. There's still really strong communities, good schools, wonderful places to raise your family.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I did. That's what I suggest.
I know. When I was telling you we're right by UC Health, it would be great to move away from the city and not have these sirens and traffic happening all the time. So I understand why you did it. And going back into just what we're talking about with the market too, we talked about the influence of different factors in Texas, Colorado, in Wyoming, we've got the lack of taxes, state income tax up there. We've got some migratory corridors that exist between all of these different Rocky Mountain states, all affecting prices with hunters, those kinds of things. So, there's definitely geographic factors that integrate with pricing structures and how we value properties. I would love to go kind of into a conversation about what buyers and sellers should be expecting when it comes to, these different market changes that are happening, where the market is headed. In your opinion, what are current buyers and sellers looking for in the ranch market based on what, land.com is seeing and the influx of traffic through your website?
We're seeing an increase in traffic and popularity just across the board. So, there's always the pyramid. There's the really high dollar places, and there's few buyers out there for that. There's, it's a very strong market, but the more you move down in that pyramid, the more properties there are, the more buyers they are, but, the lower those costs. So what we're seeing and what has amazed us is, if I go back to way back in the beginning or 1991, when I was first starting to talk to brokers, there was 25 brokers out there in Texas. It seemed like we've got 2,500 on land.com now, just in Texas.
Jeez.
So nationally, we have 4,500, I believe. If you kind of ran that out, maybe nationally, everybody working in that market, whether they're a little bit of residential and a little bit of land, you've probably got 7,000 agents and brokers out there working in this market. And that's just amazing. So, but I think that just speaks to the popularity of the land and the number of people that are buying it. So what they're looking for, it's, it just depends on the person, what their dream is. Again, with what we're seeing now, on an average, about 10 million visitors per month on land.com. It's amazing. Texas is the strongest area, again, because there's more properties there. And then you can always go, Colorado and Montana and Wyoming and California and Florida. And, you can kind of pick in what would be typical. But it just continues to grow. It's phenomenal. And what we're trying to do with land.com is with, the ranch industry has always lagged behind in, I shouldn't say sophistication, but if you look at the residential market, you can always look at comparable sales data. Same thing in commercial real estate, same thing in apartments and industry. Land.com is owned by an amazing company, CoStar. CoStar is like the largest commercial real estate data company in the world, and we own LoopNet, we own Apartments.com, which is the largest apartment MLS in the nation. And then we own homes.com, which is actually now number 2.
Wow.
This is all led by Andy Florence, who brilliant guy, and he knows how to run this business. So land.com is not as large as that, but the sophistication that we have the potential of moving to, which is the comparable sales database and tracking where the visitors are looking. With 10 million visitors, and we have 100 people working for our company now. And it takes those resources, it takes that talent pool to be able to stay on the front lines of this industry and lead it. So a lot of people in this business are, I guess we all get kind of drug kicking and screaming into the future. And there's issues with comparable sales data out there. And, a lot of times people don't want others to know what they paid for a ranch or what they sold for it. But inevitably, you can find that information. And I remember speaking at a conference a while back. There was like 500 brokers in the room. And I said, hey, how many of you guys and gals want access to a comparable sales database that is actually accurate and complete? And all 500 raised their hands. And then I said, okay, how many of you want to share that data? All but about 10 hands went down. So that's it. Everybody wants the data. And so I think, but they don't want to share it. But inevitably, that's where this market is going. It's going to happen. And I think the more transparency that we have in it, it doesn't matter what you paid for a property or what you sold it for. The market is the market. And so I believe the more that information is out there, the more access the brokers have to it and that they can give to their sellers to educate them or their buyers. I think that just improves the market.
Oh, I would agree 100%. We just hired a new broker from the commercial world, and he was intrigued by the fact that we don't share data, cross companies. And for those of you who are listening, some of the states we work in are non-disclosure states. So, sales data in Wyoming is super hard to come by because you don't have to say what the sale price was. So relationships with appraisers, things like that are bread and butter because that's the only way we get the data. But to your point, I think that's a huge detriment to a lot of our buyers and sellers because, some of those prices that were existing during COVID, 2021, 2022, were chosen by brokers who didn't have anything to back it up. But because the data wasn't really there for buyers and sellers, they took it. And they took the advice of some of those brokers that, shouldn't have been given those values. So I 100% agree with that. Data is
a great point. We worked on a comp sales database for years, and now it is the largest rural property comp database, I would say, in the nation. And what we're doing now to bring attention to it, because a large number of these brokers use it. We do not promote it out there publicly. It's really for the members and the brokers of land.com. But we've now expanded our Landstar Awards program, which pulls data from that database in order to give out these awards. And it recognizes the leaders in each of these regions based on cumulative data. So we're not out there printing individual sales or individual properties. It's cumulative or aggregate data. But we can show, hey, here are the top 5%ers that are in this region for most number of acres sold or highest dollar amount together. And because in the brokers that enter those properties, because when you go to mark a property as sold, you have the option of just deleting it or marking it as sold and then sharing it. If you share it, it's there for other brokers, or you can hide that information and it's just there for you to look at and for us to pull to give out the awards. But I think long-term, the more accurate and more complete that data, the more it helps the industry. So that's why we're doing the awards program. Yeah.
And I mean, I will say when I'm looking for comp data, the first place I go is our own database, but then I go to land.com to get a lot of that comparable sale just to even know what existed, because it's one of the only things out there for people to really get that information. So I want you to know that we value what you guys put out there.
Thank you. I always like to throw credit where credit is due. I mean, like I said, we have 100 people that work with us. I think our development team has got, 15 or 20 people in it. I was talking to our dev leader the other day, and just to get an idea of what he's working on. And every 3 weeks, he is sending out a release, which is either improvements or changes or something new to our website. And it will have 50 to 100 different issues that they've worked on, improved, corrected, or launched. And so, with 10 million people a month looking at all the brokers that we have, we get a lot of requests of, why don't you do this? Why don't you do property notifiers? Why don't you have, and that all goes on the list and we work on it. But it's amazing when you fix one thing, it can affect something else. So it's a lot of work. It's all the time. And, but we have some really talented people. And the coolest thing about our business is everybody that works at land.com loves the industry. So it's fun. We have our meetings and our managers meeting, and everybody enjoys what they're talking about. It's all business, and we have we're all pushing really hard. But at the same time, like I said, we got amazingly talented people and a large number of them. And that's what it takes to lead this industry.
And in your opinion, as leaders in the industry, especially when it comes to data and all those things, what are some of the other opportunities that exist out there for buyers and sellers, and how to leverage them, in your opinion?
Boy, that could go several different directions. I'd say from us, just as a listing service network, I would say the way that you can search for properties and you can compare properties. So you can quickly go on and say, literally, like some people do, here I am in Texas and I want to look at Colorado, or maybe I do want to look at Montana, and let's do a search for 100 to 200 acres in the $2 to $4 million price range in each one of those states. And what does that give me? Now let me save those properties, put a little heart on them so I can come back to them and just flip around. And so through that, we've had literally people that have done that, looked at properties, gone up. We had, we did a film, started to film it in Tennessee a while back, and it was a lady that was a screenwriter and her husband that was a photographer, and they were from California. COVID hits, they just make a list of where they're going to move. And Tennessee was the first on the list. And they went to Tennessee, fell in love with the property, bought it, and moved. And they're like, we had no idea. But we went on to land.com, we found the properties, we took action, we went and looked, fell in love with it, and it was the best thing that we ever did. So cool. One of the things that we're doing, just to divert here a little bit, is we have a new marketing manager, Matt Rand, who's very talented. And he put together some commercials, and they were just short, like 20-second commercials. And they were very successful. And so this worked. People like seeing these. So we did one that is a property, and it's just like this perfect setting of no improvements, just a little lake right there, some trees and nice background. And then it shows over the years, first there's just the property, and then there's the vehicle in the tent, and then there's the vehicle in the RV, and then the RV leaves, and there's the first house that gets built on there, and there's kids that are fishing. And so you just see this dream come true. And that's what he called this, is just enough dreaming. Stop just dreaming, take action, and get out there and find that property. So that's what we give you the chance to do. Oh,
I love that. And, on top of being able, and I think it's a great tool to use land.com to figure out, that's what we say when clients come to us and they say, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. I could live in these 18 different states, on top of going to these actual towns and getting to know the areas that you want to go to. Using these resources, using your broker's knowledge, knowing what's out there, knowing the price per acre, and figuring out all of that through your search criteria, through your conversations with your broker. But land.com is a great first step to figuring out what those type of properties look like in those areas. Because you might think, oh, I really love Cora, Wyoming, but then you go there and you're like, this is a totally different landscape than what I envisioned, So it's important to get that visual component. from land.
It is. And like you said, it is that first step, because from there, you see those properties, you see the brokers, and you need to connect with that broker, whether you're going to buy that property or not. But as you start those conversations, there are brokers that you click with. You can quickly tell which ones are knowledgeable, which ones are giving you the information that you need to, as you say, leverage into a property, or just to be honest with you and tell you what's going on in the market. And, really, that's why Mirr and you guys established for a long time, working into this, or in this upper end market. That's what y'all are able to do, is develop those relationships, help people buy properties, and then probably eventually sell them and buy something new.
No, it's great. And we do love working with you all. And I loved our conversation about data and values. And, as the markets continue to change and prices become more stable, I think really leveraging the data at land.com, talking to your broker about values, and really figuring out what those values actually are is crucial for buyers and sellers moving forward in this crazy market. And I guess just closing out here, Tom, given your experience, can you share some concise insights about changes you observed recently and where you might see opportunity, for brokers, for buyers, for sellers, because you've been doing this for a bit?
Then I would say really what I'm seeing is, I hate to say more of the same, but don't reinvent the wheel. This market is what it is. There's beautiful properties out there. There are well-established brokers in these areas that are very knowledgeable. And when you establish a relationship with them, when you find that property and you get out there and look, and again, that's the most important thing is, as I say, it's just a dream until you make that first step, and then it's a goal. And so, whether you inherited a property or you want to go out and buy something new, just look, pick up the phone, start calling when you get that momentum. It's like once you get out there and get your boots on the ground and look at the property, you realize, all you have to do is just engage and get out there and do it. And it's possible. And you can own your property and it goes up in value. You may decide to keep it, or you may decide to flip into something new.
Yeah, but just starting. What's the name of the Stop Dreaming?
Enough dreaming.
Enough dreaming. Enough dreaming. Just pick up the phone and do it, and get on the land. We can talk about values and investments, but actually physically, like you said, getting boots on the ground and realizing what these special places mean to people and what they mean to you and your families, and generational enjoyment is huge, and it's one of the only investments you can do that with.
My best friend that actually moved from Texas and Mississippi, where he had farmland and was in this, and then he moved to Crested Butte, Colorado. But what he always says is, life is like a lottery, but you must be present to win. You've got to get out there. If you don't just go in, and that's what I've seen. It's amazed me, the people that I've watched just start out with that first property and what they ended up with now. And what it's done for their family, the stories that they have, their kids being out there. It's a lifestyle, and it's a good investment.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tom, for taking the time today to talk with me about this ranch market. I'm excited for where things are headed. But if people do have questions, I'll have them give you a call. So thanks so much, Tom, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And if you're interested in learning more about the Land Magazine or land.com network, you can go to land.com or email Tom at talexander@land.com. And if you want to learn more about the ranch real estate market or our ranch marketing process, please be sure to subscribe to our newsletter on our website at www.mirranchgroup.com or give us a call, 303-623-4545. Awesome. Thanks so much. See you next time.